Hello and welcome to another special report from Catholic Family News. I'm Brian McCall, and we're here to talk about a story that has been developing in the last week in the United States in Texas. The Texas Supreme Court ruled on Monday that they would not create a special exception for a mother in Texas named Kate Cox, who was seeking an exception from the state's abortion restriction to have an abortion of her child. Her child had been diagnosed with Trisomy 18, which is a genetic disorder that essentially has one of the chromosomes produce three versions of itself rather than having two of each numbered chromosome, a third, and that results in a potential host of effects, of symptoms that vary really from child to child, but can be rather severe. And she said because of this and because the fact her child might not live very long, might miscarry before birth, might live after, that she wanted to have an abortion. The Texas Supreme Court denied that, said the law stays the way the legislature adopted it. But it's interesting because a lot of the pro-abortion advocates really chose this case, I think, intentionally as a way to try to bring sympathy to their cause for what they really want is abortion all times, every place, because it's obviously a very sad situation to have a child who will be born with something to suffer. But we wanted to try to present another side of that because the media has really presented as this poor woman, and really this was just no point in having this child be born. And why would the government force her to continue a pregnancy in such a situation? And so I invited someone that I met almost 20 years ago now in England. As I've mentioned many times, we lived in England for 7 years, and we had opportunity to meet many different people. It was a wonderful part of our life. But one of the people that I met while we were there, I was honored to meet, is someone that is one of the most respected and honored persons I met in England. Really a true hero. And as soon as I read this story, I thought of her and her whole family, because I said they're really a family that left a deep impression on our whole family. And we're going to invite Claudia Linton joining us from England to talk about her story. So welcome, Claudia.
Hi.
Hello.
Hi, Brian.
Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having
So
me.
we want to. Oh, it's good to see you again. It's good. So we want to talk about your daughter, Josephine, and I introduced a little bit why, but want to tell us a little bit about when you were expecting Josephine, what you found out about her diagnosis, when you found that out, and what that was like.
Oh, okay. Well, just having because I wasn't familiar with the story before
Sure.
before this, but having looked up what's happening,
Yes.
it was interesting because the lady Kate, she's the same age as I was, and she's the same
Wow.
gestational state as I was when I found out.
Wow.
So my husband and I had gone in for our regular 20-week checkup, and we had two consultants in there actually. Two people were doing it for some reason that day, and it was. I remember it was taking a really long time. It occurred to us that we'd been there a good half hour or so, and they were both, having a good look, and it never occurred to me at the time that there was anything wrong. And they eventually said, "Oh, can we just pop out for a two?" And my husband and I said, "Sure," and we were laughing because we just thought it was odd that it was taking such a long time. Anyway, they came back in and said, "We think we've found this and this and this and this," and there was a big long list of things that they'd seen, complications, and they said at the time, "We think your daughter or your child might have something called trisomy 13, which is Patau syndrome." Yes, so that was eventually confirmed, and it was very surreal. In actual fact, I just thinking about it, the whole thing was very surreal, and it didn't really sink in initially. And I think for me at the time, the biggest thing, the thing I heard the loudest when they were reeling off these lists of problems was that she was going to have a cleft lip and palate, because that can be a little bit frightening when you first see something like that. But that was just the shyness there.
Right. Sure.
Yeah, so that's how we initially found out. And yeah, so she had cleft lip and palate, congenital heart disease. She had a very mild form of epilepsy. She had cataracts and club feet and all sorts of things that they kind of reeled off.
So when you found this out, and this wasn't your first child, you already had a daughter before this, right?
Yes, she
Yes,
was 3.5 at the time.
yes. Did some of
Um,
the healthcare workers try to talk to you about or persuade you to abort your
yes,
child? Yeah.
yes. So after that
Wow.
scan, we were referred back obviously quite quickly, and we saw the consultant in charge of
Right.
that sort of situation. And of course, in our heads, it was always we were just going to have a baby. There was never any question. And
Mm.
I think he was surprised, and he was quite aggressive because after he'd reeled off all the complications and all the problems, and she was going to have limited life and probably wouldn't last the pregnancy, and if she did, they would she wouldn't probably live long after the actual birth and all the scary stuff. And in my head already, I mean, there was never any time where we considered an abortion, but he had to tell me, and I knew what he was going to say. He goes, "Well, there is another option." I said, "I know what you're going to say." I said, "I don't want to hear it." I said, "That's not even something that we would consider." And he said, "But I have to tell you." He was very insistent. "I have to tell you. It's
Wow.
just my job to make sure that you're aware of all your options." And I said, and so of course I said, "All right, go ahead." And I said, "No, you can have an abortion." And I said, "Well, that's not something we're going to consider." And I think the thing I found the strangest was because she was so active in my womb, and I could feel her all
Mm.
the time, and she was having a great time, and they were very dismissive of the fact that there was something living in there, and she was, there was a baby in there, and it was all about my care and how they were going to take care of me, and there was no consideration of the baby, and even to the point of when I would be delivering, there was no consideration as to whether or not to come out safely. It was just purely, and I very frustrating. But luckily, it's funny. In actual fact, it was my wife who gave me the name of some pro-life doctors because we did feel a little bit abandoned, and we
Mm.
didn't really know where to go. And so we got in contact with them, and they were awesome. They helped us a lot. They just gave us support. They weren't at field as such, but yeah, that we got lots of support from them, and yeah, so we were very lucky in that regard.
So then tell us, because again, I think when you and I talked before this, your comment to me was, it sounds like this poor mother in Texas, they've just tried to scare her and tell her all the worst things that can happen, which, as it's not exactly the same diagnosis, but in the same sort of family
It's
of problems.
very similar, very
You really
similar.
don't know until the baby's born or exactly what happens. So you've told us a little bit about physically your daughter, how it manifested, but what was she like? Tell us what was she like after she was born? What was it like being with her? What was her personality? You already in the womb could tell she was very active, you told us, but just share
Yes.
with us a little bit of your memories of her.
Oh, she was amazing, and she touched anyone who came in contact with her were, because the first thing she would do as she, progressed, because they say, she wasn't going to have any recognition, she wasn't going to be able to communicate. She would literally just be sitting there like a dolly kind of thing and not having,
Mm.
but it was the complete opposite. The first time, someone walked into a room, she had her arms out, if you could get close, if she could get you close enough to her, she'd be kissing your face. And she would laugh, and she loved playing with her sister, and her sister adored her, absolutely adored her. And yeah, and it was interesting too, because when she did finally pass away, she was practically 4 years old, but there was so many people turned up at the funeral, people I hadn't seen since before I was even married back in. So she had a huge effect. The church was full. It
I
was
remember
amazing.
that. I remember her funeral because our one of our
Mhm.
children who was born around the same time as Josephine Thomas. And it's funny. I always say a lot. Children have such a deeper sense than we do. They can just sort of they connect to things and understand them so more easily than we do. Because I remember being around the same age, used to spend time with her, and he was going, "Oh," I said, "What did you?" I don't. We were at an event or something, or a party at church. What'd you do? Oh, I talked to Josephine for a long time. I had a long talk with her, and
Oh,
he would come home and say, because I remember he was a bit young at the time, being her age. We were saying, well, should we bring the children, to the funeral? We'll be, and he just said, I have to go to Josephine's funeral. I have. She was my best friend, or she was my friend. So, definitely in our own
oh.
family, we saw that that effect that she
And
had.
the other thing I wanted to just say was that there were a lot of health professionals involved in her life throughout, and they were excellent. And even to the where one particular nurse, when we ended up in A&E one day, and she was particularly fantastic, and she was so kind to Josephine and to us, and I never forgot her, and her name was Eloise. And she will never know this, but our last daughter, we named her that because this young lady had. So these people, they don't realize, how important they are and the effect, the long-lasting effect that they can have, when they're truly invested as you are. Feels like.
So
It was an amazing.
uh, well, so obviously it was, anytime where there's a child that needs special care, it's difficult. So just daily basis caring for her obviously was hard. How did you get through those years? What helped you to sort of cope with the challenges that came from taking care of her?
Yeah, well, it's when you've got the unknown aspect there, it is very frightening, and you kind of, you're
Mm,
scared of what you don't know. But once you're in the middle of it, it just becomes your new norm, and it's not scary anymore because you just get on with it, and you get a new routine. And if there is another child there like we had with our oldest daughter, it helps because they just loved each other. But yeah, it just becomes your new norm. You just get on with it, and it's not a chore. It's not a chore at all. It's just yeah, it's just life.
wow. And so, as I think we mentioned, you have had other children since. Tell us about your whole family. You've had more children
Yeah.
after
Well,
Josephine, and
I
grandchildren now, I
had
guess. Yes.
yeah, I can't believe it. I had we had another son not long. He was
Mhm.
born in 2004, and then we had another son in 2005, and that was a busy time because 10 months apart. But then we had Josephine and Eden. But it was nice that at least the third or oldest child got to spend a bit of time with Josephine. But our
Mhm.
fourth child, he was born on the Friday, and then the following Thursday, Josephine passed away because
Wow.
she'd got a chest infection. Because of in the first 2 years of Josephine's life, she was absolutely fine health wise, but then she started getting ear infections, and then it was UTIs, and then the chest infections. And I think because of all the antibiotics that she was on, she contracted RSA, all the hospital visits. And then I think what happened is when she got the chest infection at the end, the MRSA kind of attacked her as well, and that was.
Mm.
But we had, so within those 6 days of our fourth child's birth to 6 days later, Josephine passed away after she'd just been a bridesmaid at her aunt's wedding.
Ah,
And then we've had another two after that, who are now 13 and 8. Yeah, and they all know their sister. They all know about her, and wish that they had been here for her.
you mentioned a Thursday. Maybe I'm remembering this incorrectly, but I thought, was that the Feast of the Ascension when she died? Is that right? It was on the Feast of the Ascension.
Yes,
Yeah.
it was,
Yeah.
and that was such a comfort, because in my
Yes.
head, our Lord took her up in His arms, He on
Yes.
that day she was with Him, so that was a great comfort.
Yes.
And the funny thing is, because most nights you are up for some reason or another, but that night, the night that she passed away, I couldn't tell you what, but I slept like a log. Didn't wake up once. It was really
Wow.
surreal.
Huh.
I think I was at peace. So
Wow. So, and you've touched on this, but what effect do you think having, even though her life was a short life, what effect did her life have on your family even today? What would you say?
Well, they're all very pro-life. My daughter
Hmm.
was before she kind of got married and had a family, she's very invested in the pro-life movement, very
Mm,
vocal, going into schools and discussing those topics with the school kids and having a profound effect on a lot of them, because most of them didn't know anything about it and had never heard information she was giving them. And then the next two down, who are now 18 and 19, they're involved peripherally with the pro-life movement. They do a lot of public witness and that sort of thing.
wow.
And the nice thing is too, I think sometimes people are a little bit scared when they see somebody who's got special needs, not quite sure how to approach them. But they've learned how to do that, just because they're all generally happy and they just love each other, made a fuss of, like most
Wow.
kids.
Oh.
Yeah.
So we talked about this again, this sad story in Texas, where again I really feel badly. I think a lot of these pro-abortion people are just take advantage of these situations and want to use it. But if you could talk to one of these a mother like this lady in Texas or another who's received this kind of news while they're pregnant, what would you say to them? If you had a chance to talk to them, what would you say to them?
The first thing that pops into my mind is, you'll never regret it. These little people, they just have such a huge impact on your life in the positive sense, regardless of all the little things that you have to deal with health wise, they're joyful and they spread joyfulness and yeah, you would never ever regret that, keeping a child with special needs. And and they are generally with children like this, the ones with Edwards syndrome or Patels, their lives are so short and so precious, and they're worth every minute. And it is scary when you first, like I said earlier, it's scary, the unknown and not knowing what to expect, but it's wonderful. It's the best experience. It has a profound effect on your family, on the people who are peripherally in your lives. So it's not something you'd ever regret. And there's a lot
Wow.
of support out there.
Sorry, go ahead. There's a lot of support.
Yeah, there's a lot of support. I mean, we had amazing healthcare professionals. I'm not quite sure what the situation is these days, but I mean, we had a huge amount of help with regards to just, therapy, training. She even went to school and had the most amazing time there doing. And then you had people coming in and helping you set out your environment to accommodate for them. And yeah, so there's a lot available, and you get a lot of support too from the other mums who are kind of in the same situation.
Wow. Well, is there anything else you want to share that we haven't talked about, or any other stories, or anything you at all if you want to say?
Um, no, she just lived a very normal life within our family, and we did lots of things. She did a lot of things with us. She even went on holiday to Sicily. She got to go on the airplane and swim in the ocean, and so nothing's, bounds. It might take a little bit longer to do things. You have to organise yourself a little bit better with regards to accommodating their needs. But yeah, it doesn't affect your life in any way that's negative.
Wow. Well, wonderful. Thank you for sharing that with us. And it is, again, as hard as it is, the obligation of parent is to try to bring your children to heaven. And as difficult as it is to lose a child, to have one that is already there, that it must be a
Yes,
consolation. So it must
yes,
be.
and we
Well,
pray to her as well. I get her to get involved with trying to sort out the other kids and making sure she's keeping an eye on them, and so we've got a little saint there.
oh, that's wonderful. Well, thank you for sharing. I know it's difficult, but thank you for sharing your story with us. And I'm sure it will touch some people, help some people, and be a balance to some of what the media tries to tell us, that the
Yes.
children are their lives are not meaningless, and it's not just what they want to tell us. And it's a beautiful witness that you've given. So thank you for taking the time to talk with us.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for
And
having
if you've
me.
and you, viewers, thank you for listening. If you enjoyed our show, please help us by sharing this video, posting it places, liking it, subscribing to our channels. The more you do that, the more people that get alerted about this content. And as always, if you liked our free content, please consider subscribing to Catholic Family News, our monthly newspaper. So thank you, Claudia. Please give the best to your family, and thank you to everyone. And we'll see you next time.
Yes, thank you so much.